Hello again, YouTube. So today we're going to be making a video on my personal library. This is at my apartment. So mostly I have two different shelves of books right here that I sometimes read. Uh, some of them I read. I will be honest, a lot of these books I haven't really read. Some of them I look at sometimes because some of these are reference books, and a lot of these are also some of the college textbooks which I have had. So let's start off at this end and we'll work our way down to the next shelf. And if you're wondering, I'm recording this on an iPhone 13, so the video quality should be very good. So starting with these three books, these are collections of various designs which I've made, just kind of drawings and schematics. They go from 2014 until last year. I have more designs from this year, but that's obviously my current book. These are full. So I have already made videos about these two a few years ago, but we'll just show some of this one right here. So we have a lot of different things we could show here. Like this is a PID control loop thing. Here's measuring a capacitor using different methods. Here's some schematics for my robot. This is actually what I used in my robot when I made the hip gear movement. And this is from 2020. And here's a composite video signal, and yeah, some other stuff which I have right here. I need to make a full video on just that alone, but yeah, that's my design notebook. And then here we have a book direct from Dell. This is just a book that I got a few years ago about it's written by Michael Dell, the founder of the Dell company. And this was when I was trying to start my own business. So I was trying to learn about various business ideas. And that's where I thought that this book would be useful. I did not pay $8 for it. But yeah, I have looked at this a little bit. I haven't read it. So maybe when I do, I'll make a proper video about that. Here we have a couple manga books. This is Mikuban of Hatsune Miku. This one I have not read it in full, but I have read some of it. It's just some comics with Miku in them, and I like Miku, so we have comics of Miku. And over here we have no matter how I look at it, it's your guys' fault I'm not popular, or Watamote is the name of the anime. So yeah, it's about this girl going through her daily life. Tomoko Kuroki. So that's that. I have read this in full. It's kind of a funny book. Then we're gonna have some different things here. We have Guns, Germs, and Steel. I bought this a few years ago. I haven't read it. It's just about the fate of human societies. I heard this was a good book. Maybe I'll read it sometime. I don't really read a lot of books very much, but I have some. So there you go. And then here is Azumanga Daioh. It is another manga book. So yeah, I have watched the anime for this, and I have read some of these. Once again, I have not read this in full. It is a very big book. So yeah, it's just some comics of that. And if you may have noticed, pretty much all these books are either going to be reference books or manga books, but a couple of these are both. So that's where these two come in. We have the Manga Guide to Microprocessors, which is kind of interesting. This book kind of explains in a deeper level than you really might think just by looking at the cover. This explains how computers work, And I have made some videos about how I'm designing a custom computer architecture. I have made an emulator for that architecture, and I'm actually building it out in hardware right now. And pretty much everything you need to know the basics of how to make a computer architecture from scratch could be found in this book. This is a surprisingly deep level of knowledge into this subjects. Like, it shows like the different instructions a computer architecture could have, the different types of instruction. There's arithmetic, logic, bit shift, and then data transfer, branch for instruction conditions. So this stuff is very fundamental. If you need a reference book for computer architecture, as silly as it might be to say, this is not a bad book to have just to learn about that. So that's that book. Over here we have the Manga Guide to Physics. I bought this book just because I liked the other book so much. I haven't read this book. Once again, it's manga, and it talks about physics. I would assume it's just as insightful into this subject as the other book is, but I haven't really looked too much into this. I have taken different physics classes. I have a physics textbook as well, but yeah, so that's that book. Once again, I haven't really read it, but I have read the microprocessor book. This is a pretty good book. You should get it. Here we have some books about calculus. This is just a random textbook. I don't know why I have it. I did not use this for a class, but I just had it to learn calculus. Then I have a conversational Spanish. I've tried to learn Spanish several different times. Haven't really gotten that far. So yeah, this is just a reference book on basic Spanish. I haven't really used it that much. I do a lot of the different things, and learning Spanish is one of the last priorities of my life. But I have learned Japanese a lot more than Spanish, and I've been studying that. So then we have just some textbooks. These are for college. It's Calculus 1 and Calculus 2. Calculus 2 is the hardest class that I've ever taken. And that's saying something, because I'm about to graduate pretty much next year with a degree in electrical engineering. And out of all the engineering classes I've taken, Calculus 2 is the hardest class by far. Calculus 2 deals with methods of integration, and there are a lot of different types of things you could do, but you have to be very specific about the methods which you use for integration. Like for differentiation, which is in this Calculus 1 book, in the Calculus 1 class, it's just you have product rule, you have a quotient rule, and you have chain rule, and the whole thing is pretty much you could just plug any differentiation problem into the chain rule, and you're good to go. But for integration, there's a lot of different things you have to do. There's integration by substitution, and you have different equations which you have to use, and it is very difficult that I found. And this book goes through it in full, but as a textbook, it was really hard to learn using this textbook. So yeah, I'm not too sure about it, though it's kind of there, I guess. Another textbook right here is Linear Algebra. I took a class in linear algebra a while ago. Linear algebra has to do with matrices and operations you do. So it's kind of removed from a lot of the other math courses which I have taken. But yeah, it just does with different things you could do with matrices, eigenvalues, reduced row echelon form, that kind of stuff. With matrices, I found this topic kind of confusing, but it is easier than Calculus 2. And with these, I just kind of... a lot of this stuff you can pretty much just do it in the calculator, and it's better anyway because the whole deal with matrices is to deal with a lot of data. And that's more powerful when you can use something like MATLAB. So yeah, there's that. And then moving along here, we have, once again, more textbooks. I have a lot of textbooks. I always buy my textbooks. I don't rent them, just because I can. This was Fundamentals of Applied Electromagnetics from my electromagnetics class. I found this class really boring. It's not my favorite subject, I guess, because it's kind of, I guess it's not really as interesting as some of the other engineering classes where you could do like experiments and stuff. More so, this is just about pretty much just a bunch of different equations. You put them in MATLAB, and that's pretty much all you do. This is not my favorite book in the world. I really don't look at it very much. Then we have this book of Experimentation. This is a book I thought would be interesting about like measurement and experiment design, which is what it's about. I haven't read this book very much, though it does look kind of interesting. It just has fundamentals of planning an experiment. If I do any formal experimentation, maybe I'll read this book more. So that's that. This is just an old paperback book about the moon landing. I'm not sure if I've read this book before. I think I've read like halfway through it. But yeah, it's just about the history of space exploration. You can see the V2 rocket right there. And what's interesting is that this book is not... is pretty much contemporary to a lot of this stuff. So it was first printed in July 1969. So this book was printed basically right during the moon landing, which is kind of an interesting perspective that you could have. I did not pay a lot of money for this book. I think it was like 50 cents or something. So it's an interesting thing to have, and that's why I have it. Continuing with the theme of space exploration is the case for Mars. Unlike a lot of these books, I have actually read this one pretty much all the way through. This is by Robert Zubrin, and it pretty much explains the different challenges and interesting topics in basically a manned Mars mission. He goes through his specific architecture for how he plans to do a manned Mars mission, and what this book really does is it stresses that with current technology and a little bit of development, a manned Mars exploration and colonization is possible. And that's really the key focus of this book. Before Robert Zubrin published this book, the manned Mars exploration was mostly focused on a lot of really pretty much science fiction type stuff that you would need to go to Mars. Like at the time in the 80s with the space exploration initiative by George H.W. Bush, he was pretty much pursuing a architecture to go to Mars and other places in the solar system, while pretty much using a lot of different things like the space shuttle, a bunch of space stations, a moon base, and yeah, it was very complicated. It was overcomplicated. It required nuclear rockets and a lot of different things that, well, nice to have, would take a lot of money and time to make. So this is where Robert Zubrin came in and wrote this book about basically how you could get to Mars using just a few rocket launches. You would have a habitation module, a Earth return vehicle, and a lander. And pretty much with that, you could, so here's like his illustration of what the habitation module would be. if you read the book The Martian, it is taken from inspiration from this, with having different modules. And what you could do is over time you could build up a bunch of habitation modules, and that would lead to a colonization of Mars. So, and then he goes over different basically mathematical equations about different basically orbital mechanics. He also talks about using the Sabatier process to make methane fuel for the rockets, which that's actually what is going to be done with the Starship rocket. So it's a very interesting book to read. This book, I've read this a little bit. This is Artificial You, AI and the Future of Your Mind. So this is about artificial intelligence, and basically a lot of the philosophical ideas of what that would even look like. Could an artificial intelligence be conscious? Is that really even a thing? Could it be conscious in a way that is not the same way as a human is? Or different stuff like that. And a lot of implications of like mind uploading, how you would do that. That there are a lot of different ideas about, like, if you upload your mind, is that really you? Or is it a copy of you? If you want to know my opinion of this, I'm of the opinion that mind uploading as a transfer of consciousness is possible as long as there's only one version of you at any particular point of time. So if you copy a person by scanning their brain and uploading it, then you have two different people. But if you gradually replace different parts of the brain, which are artificial parts of the brain, you have a continuity because it is one at a single extent of time. And that's there's just a bunch of stuff that reading this book kind of makes you think about. So that's interesting in that perspective. Moving on, over here is some more textbooks. This is a big book right here. This is a textbook for my electronics class in college. So this textbook goes over the material for 2 semesters of courses. So it's a lot of stuff right here in this book, and this is just about like basically circuits using transistors, and a lot of different theory about bipolar junction transistors, MOSFETs, a lot of the theory of that, diodes, there's amplifiers, that kind of stuff. So yeah, this goes over a lot of analog circuits. So it is kind of interesting in that way. So that's that textbook. It's quite big. And this textbook is almost as big as my physics textbook. Once again, this is 2 semesters of classes. So it's a lot of stuff right here. This goes over pretty much all of classical mechanics. It goes over the Newtonian physics right here of like motion and stuff. And in the second half of it is a classical electro. It goes over like physics and electricity and electromagnetism. So half of it is like Newton stuff, and the other half is classical electromagnetism. I think it goes over in pretty much as much detail as you need for like engineering and stuff, and the rest of it is in like other books. Here's another specialty book which I have right here. This is on semiconductor design. This is also for a class that I've taken on semiconductors. So yeah, this is pretty much goes over anything that involves semiconductors, like computer chips and stuff. And this is at a very low level about like how the semiconductor is laid out, how a MOSFET is designed, like in that actual way. This stuff I do find pretty interesting, but it's obviously hard to experiment with because you kind of hard to make semiconductors. But yeah, that's that book. This is a book for my microprocessor systems class. It has to do with this MSP432 microcontroller. If you want to know about this, it's a microcontroller, and it's like an Arduino, but it's harder to use, and it is more powerful in certain ways, but not really in ways that you really use. So I prefer to use Arduino for stuff most of the time. Though for this class I had to use the MSP432. It's more expensive and it's harder to use, but you can program it in assembly if you want. So yeah, if you want to do that. You could also program it in C like an Arduino. But unlike an Arduino, this doesn't have any really very many library support. So that's a lot of thing with programming, is oftentimes how hard something is to program is depending on how much stuff you get for free. Like Arduino is easy because there's so many libraries available for free and you could just use it. Whereas for stuff like this, it doesn't come with libraries, so you have to kind of code everything yourself. Even though you could do it on the Arduino, but it provides libraries. This really doesn't. It's not really as well supported, though it is used more in commercial applications, I guess. So that's why we used it for that class. This book right here is Digital Design. This is basically about like logic circuits and stuff like that. Think about like multiplexers, flip-flops, adders, that kind of stuff. Programmable logic elements array. This stuff's pretty interesting because it basically is like you could program what it does, kind of like in an FPGA, but it just kind of lays it out right here. So that's pretty interesting. And then it goes over kind of the basic stuff. This is one of the classes that I found the most interesting to take, just because I'm really interested in like how computers work and stuff. So this was a pretty good introduction to that topic. Before taking this class and reading this book, I have taught myself some of it, but this book I think was really good in like learning other stuff that I wouldn't have known otherwise. Like before I took this class, I was really only knew about like adder circuits and stuff like that. So this kind of opened my eyes on like how a computer works. Once again, I would say that if you want to design a computer architecture, the Manga Guide to Microprocessors is probably better, even still. But this book is more formalized, and you might not look as stupid for having it. But I mean, really, who's the stupid one when you're learning with anime girls? That's the best way. This right here is from like an introductory class about like studying engineering. It's kind of a strange book about like study habits and stuff like that. I haven't really looked at this book at all. It's not particularly interesting from my perspective. This right here is about Japan, the land and its people, and it is written in English and Japanese. So I kind of thought that it would be interesting to learn Japanese using this book. I haven't read it, though I do know this is like Nihon no, and this means left, I think. This is 1960, and this means year. Nafu se pon ni yoru mono ga sen something de aru. I don't know what that means, but I can read the hiragana, so that's a trick to do. Under here we have, this book's pretty interesting. It's about space stations. It goes over like the design of space stations, kind of interesting stuff. About like how do you have a nuclear reactor on a space station. yeah, different kind of like physics about like the docking adapters, stuff like that. So I think that's a pretty interesting book. Down here we have some wiring books. This is just like how to wire electrical stuff, and then this is a plumbing book. I got these books when I was a small child. They were very interesting for me to look at. I'm not going to take them out because they're under these other books, which are chemistry books. This is from high school. This book was from college, the chemistry book. I don't know. Chemistry wasn't the most interesting topic for me, to be honest. But yeah, that's what's there. So I think now we can move on to the lower section. Also over here I have a model of the Mir space station. This is the Orion capsule on a little keychain thing. I thought that was kind of interesting. So we can move down here. And here's some other books. These I haven't really read as much, so we're going to go probably faster here. Just because we're already at 26 minutes. So here's a book about arc welding. I just kind of like this pretty much just because it's an old book. I thought it was kind of interesting. Same as for these books. This is alternating current machines. Yeah, these are kind of books about like stuff that I probably understand now, but I really didn't understand when I was like 15 years old when I bought these books. But yeah, so we have that. You have engineering materials about different materials. Electrical measurements. This is kind of interesting about like how measurements were made back in the day. So like right now we can kind of like measure stuff with like just kind of a multimeter and stuff. But this is kind of interesting how it kind of explains how it sets up in like the equations that were used. And I don't know, sometimes these older books are just interesting to have, not really for reference as they are just for interest to look at, if that makes sense. This book right here is also interesting. It's about drawing, like drafting designs. So I kind of did learn about how to make like clear designs using this book. If you recall in the design notebooks that I have way up here. Having a book about drawing is, I think, kind of crucial if you wanted to draw stuff by hand on paper, because people really don't do that anymore. But I kind of think it's a skill worth pursuing in a limited way. This book is the C programming language. This is the original book on the C programming language. It defines everything that the C programming language does. If you want to learn about C, this is kind of a book that you could use for reference. Like file I/O, structures, pointers and arrays, function structure. So if you want to know about programming, learning programming language is incredibly easy once you learn the stuff. The hard part of a programming language is finding out where different things apply and how to actually solve problems using it. So I think for that, really, you just kind of have to learn by examples and like look up a tutorial on how to make like a calculator or something and then change it a little bit, maybe add a different function or something. So like you might have a 4-function calculator and you're like, oh, now I'll look up this algorithm that does a square root, and now I can do square roots on it. That kind of thing. Just implementing algorithms is really how you learn how to program stuff. And then there's our stuff like linked lists and binary trees. That kind of stuff is hard to do in C. But yeah, there's the C programming language. Then we have some more books about electronics. This one is about like computer stuff and telecommunications. Yeah, this book is also from like the 70s or something, so it is kind of interesting to look at these old books about like, oh, look at this room full of like telephones. That's kind of weird. Some time-sharing computer systems have large numbers of data sets, modems, on lines, It is possible to avoid this expense. Something with the D6 signal. Oh yeah, so I think what these are acoustic couplers, because back then in the 70s it was actually illegal to tap into the phone system. So basically, if you wanted a modem, you could not wire it to the phone system. What you had to do was like couple it through the actual handset. So like your computer was sending data acoustically over the phone lines via sound. And then there's other stuff like Teletype Machines, which were like the old interaction between computers. Yeah, this kind of stuff about like the communications network. So this is like the old internet as it was in the 70s. Again, these are interesting books to have them to look at. Then we have this book about control engineering. This is just stuff about like basically analog systems and signals. So I actually just took a class based on this about like transfer functions and stuff like that. I'm probably gonna make some videos about this soon, but yeah, it's some kind of interesting stuff. When I first got this book, I had no idea how to understand it, but now that I've taken a class on this, this stuff looks rather familiar. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting book to have, as most of these are. Oh, like here is like the something we actually did in class, which is to analyze a mechanical system through the context of an electrical system. So like there's an analogy between a spring mass system and an RLC circuit. So that it's kind of had here. Like this is the spring mass system. So there you go. There's a book on algorithms. I read this on the plane once. The Trouble with Physics. This is a book about like, it's from like 2006. It's about like different ideas in physics around that time, about like string theory and supersymmetry, and how you can't really have a grand unified theory of physics or whatever it were. Yeah, it goes over like basically struggles in how physics was being done at that point in time, as it were. This is NAR Physics books, 6 Easy Pieces. I don't know, it's not my favorite book, to be honest. This book right here is Teach Yourself C in 21 Days. So I got this a few years ago before I took classes on C. And yeah, it just kind of goes over some different things. Just kind of lays it out. Once again, if you want to learn programming, the best thing to do is just to look up tutorials online and then modify the tutorials slightly and then combine them with other tutorials and learn how to do different things like that. Some school yearbooks. And then we have some more Japanese books. These were recommended by when I was trying to learn Japanese. I still am learning Japanese, but now I pretty much just use Duolingo. For all the flaws of Duolingo that people say it has, I remember to do Duolingo every day. But I haven't really looked at these books at all. So this is Japanese through real activities. Nihongo Yaki, something like that. This is Japanese for busy people, and this is our book about how to learn Japanese. Once again, if you're gonna get this book, get the hiragana version. Don't get the Latin text version, because Japanese is written in hiragana, so just learn that. So this is kana, and then we have this like kato, moshi, sumi, susan, so sumi-san no otaku desu ka? So I guess this is asking this person, are they an otaku? And then Sumisu so says, hi, so desu, which means yes, that is true. So there you go. I am an expert in Japanese language. Speaking of Japanese, I have a bunch of painter's tape, which is on this book. This is Excel Saga, which is another manga series. I have watched the anime for this. It was on YouTube. This book is in Japanese. I can't understand it, but what I can understand is this says Akuseru Saga. So it says Excel Saga. So there you go. This girl's name is Excel, and that's her little dog, and that's her friend, and this is Lord Palazzo. Yay. So go read that manga or watch the anime. It's kind of funny. So moving farther along, right here is this book by Arthur C. Clarke, The Promise of Space. This was a very kind of old book as well, about like basically space exploration. This book actually goes over like Hohmann transfers and different orbital configurations, and yeah, this was written at a time while man was landing on the moon. So this was kind of the whole idea of okay, we've gotten this working, we can land a man on the moon, so now we're on the moon, we have all this free real estate. Well, let's do something with it, and let's build a base here. Well, let's extend this as a permanent extension of human civilization. And this was really a missed opportunity in time, but you could see in these books that were contemporary, like they really saw that, like, oh, by 2000 assuredly we'll be on Mars, we'll have cities on the moon. So it's kind of interesting to see how that was. As of this year, 2022, mankind has yet to go back to the moon, so that's something we really need to work on. It's an interest of mine, as you could see with the Case for Mars up right here. And these two books kind of look at each other in interesting ways. This book and A Case for Mars. Like, this book is about, okay, we've landed a man on the moon, now what can we do using this? We could do all sorts of things. Where the Case for Mars book is about, like, okay, we haven't gone to the moon in a while, but let's like learn using what we have, what is the shortest critical path to get us back to the moon, or to go to Mars entirely and just skip the moon, or go to both places and beyond. So that's kind of my review of those. This is a book about the history of computing. I haven't really read this book very much, but it is kind of interesting in a certain way, or at least it caught my eye when I bought it. These books I've had for a very long time. This is Linux. I did a book report on this book in the 7th grade, so and I haven't read it since. But yeah, this book is about like Ubuntu 8.04 and using that. Oh look, this is the instruction manual for a solar panel that I bought 10 years ago. I wonder where that went. So yeah, this is just about like how to use Linux. And, like 10 years ago, this was really interesting for me. It's about like, oh, Linux is like this free operating system. What is that? So yeah, 12-year-old me was very incited by this book. Though again, really, if you want to learn how to use Linux, you just do it. And today, I really don't use Linux very much. I use it. Sometimes Linux is good for programming, like for programming in assembly. On the rare occasion that I do that, I use Linux, but I use it in a virtual machine. Just for like desktop stuff, I use Mac or PC. That's pretty much it. Though some people will insist that Linux is the best operating system ever. So this is a book about electronics projects. Funny thing about this is I think this is a book, yeah, this is a book about like building stuff using electronics. I think my parents bought me this book just to get me interested in something else, because when I was like 13 years old, I tried to build an airplane out of trash bags and aluminum beams, and it kind of took up the whole garage, and I kind of got in trouble for that. I was planning on flying it. I still maintain to this day that it probably would have worked. I wouldn't have carried a person, but yeah, the problem I had with building that airplane was basically propulsion. Like, what I had was like a huge wing, and I didn't have a way to propel it. So, as an effort to get me interested in something else, my parents bought me this book about like building robots and stuff. Again, this was when I was like 12 years old, so yeah, this kind of stuff pretty much just perplexed me in certain ways. I didn't have a soldering iron, so doing stuff with electronics was kind of out of my grasp, and I didn't really understand how breadboards worked. So pretty much when I wanted to make stuff with electronics, when I was 12 years old, I would just kind of twist wires together and hope it would work. But yeah, that's that book. This is a manual to a calculator that was hanging down. So continuing with the theme of stuff that I was into when I was a child are these Make magazine books. I used to read these a lot during lunch at school, during middle school. These ones not so much, but I would pretty much buy these every month. Back in when were these published? This one's from October 2012, but really my favorite one was this one. I would look at this book like when I was in the 6th grade. Pretty much reading this book was like the only thing that I would do. This book, it was from this is Make Volume 27. It's from like 2011. Yeah, offer valid through. Yeah, this was like from August 2011. So this is a very old book. But yeah, I would just read through this book all the time because it had like these interesting projects, and like they were all kind of approachable to me. Yeah, like this one was like how to use a PS2 keyboard. I was like, oh, you can use a PS2 keyboard on an Arduino. That was the most interesting thing for me at that time. And even like these advertisements were interesting. Like oh, it's a robot hand. That's interesting. And yeah, everything here was just kind of interesting to look at. I have gotten some newer Make magazines, but I don't know, they're just not really as interesting. This one's from 2020. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just not really into magazines anymore, I guess. But when I was 12 years old, or not even that, 11 years old, that was interesting to read at lunch. So moving towards the end, we have this book right here, Working for Yourself. Once again, I was / am looking to start a business, and in that there's a lot of legal issues about different types of corporations, about like tax laws that vary by state and by federal districts or whatever. And pretty much the only thing I do is sometimes I sell stuff, I guess, but yeah, this kind of goes over like forming a corporation, about like taxes. So yeah, I read this book. It provides some interesting information on the subject. Over here we have some more home improvement books about like bathrooms and plumbing. Once again, when I was a child, these were interesting books to look at while watching SpongeBob or whatever during the commercial breaks. This is a book about like digital manga. I do drawing a lot, but I haven't really looked at this book very much. So here's like if you want to draw, I guess it's like a Gothic Lolita. So there you go. This is about building robots for beginners. So yeah, this is another book my parents got me when I was a child. So yeah, this is about like mixing and matching Legos with like other stuff and circuits to make a robot. So kind of interesting. There you go. And then farther to the end of it, we have a jar of coins, and we have stuff right here. So we have some different books right here. We have Don Quixote, which I probably do need to read this book actually. Maybe I should read this book in Spanish so I could actually learn some Spanish. But yeah, this is the entire works by Don Quixote, which I haven't really read this book very much. All I know is that it involves a guy going around chasing windmills or something. So there you go. And then we have the Penguin History of the World. And I bought this book when I was doing a school project about ancient history. And I don't know, for whatever reason, but I'm most interested in like the first half of this book where it talks about like the far ancient past, like basically like the first civilizations. That stuff was interesting to me. About like not even ancient Egypt, but like Mesopotamia is like the first civilization. About like Sargon of Akkad, the first emperor. And this is interesting because like they were inventing what a country was. And yeah, this stuff was interesting. It took like thousands of years to just kind of come up with a formal idea of civilization. And the interesting thing about civilization is that people talk about civilization, but keep in mind, civilization developed at different parts of the world at different times independently from each other. It developed in Mesopotamia, it developed in Egypt, it developed in China and India and Mesoamerica and Peru. So yeah, civilization developed in different parts of the world, and it would always be formed by similar things. There would always be formal legal codes, systems of writing was another thing that civilizations have. Also stuff like metallurgy and agriculture. So like writing, laws, metallurgy, and agriculture. If you have at least 3 of those, you have a civilization. And that's kind of stuff that was pretty much ubiquitous throughout the attempts to make a civilization in early history. Also, on a similar subject is this book right here, which is about the history of Rome. Roman history was also kind of interesting to me. It's not something I would study or whatever, but it is kind of interesting about like the similar similarities people could call between ancient Rome and modern America. It's kind of interesting about like how it was a large state, and like Rome lasted for a very long time. It was like Rome lasted in one form or another for over 2,000 years, if you think about it, from the beginning of the Roman kingdom to the fall of the Byzantine Empire and its last successor states in the 1400s. So like, I'm pretty sure Columbus was alive when the Roman Empire fell, and when the Roman Empire was first going, it was like really ancient times. So that was some interesting stuff right there. So yeah, thank you for watching this. If you watched it at all, this is my complete library collection of my personal library. So I think this is a pretty interesting thing to look at. And thank you for watching this video, and see you in the next one.